Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon for those of you who are in Asia. As Julie said, I'm going to spend a little bit of time this morning just talking through how we at the UTA operate and in particular how we, in a sense, deliver on our mission. I'm going to talk through the working group model, how it's structured, and then talk you through the actual working groups, give you a little bit of sense of what they're working on, some of the deliverables, so you can get a sense of both how we operate and the kind of things we're very focused on. If I've got a little bit of time towards the end of that, I'll basically try and wrap up with some examples showing how the working groups have been used to deliver some real technologies into cities. So I'll switch to my slides if I can at this point. Just give me a second. So let me dive straight in. Just a little bit of a background. I think for several of you, you will have heard talks yesterday and the day before, an overview of what the Urban Technology Alliance is about. But for those of you who are maybe just joining for today, a quick sense of what it is we're focused on, three particular strands. On the left-hand side there, you can see we have the Urban Technology Alliance city scale test beds. And these are really the cities that are working with us, that are members of the Alliance. They're coming to us with their problems. And in some cases, they're test beds. In some cases, those test beds are very well developed. Taipei, for example, Busan have very, very extensive test beds. In some cases, they're still early days. They're still building those test beds out. But they're kind of, in a sense, the drivers and the pull for some of the technologies and some of the projects we work on. The cities have the problems and have the test beds. We then have a strand in the middle there, which is our matchmaking service or matchmaking platform. And really that dovetails with those test beds. That's about if a city comes with a particular need, or if one of our partners comes with a particular solution, how do we bring everybody together to take a look at that technology, that need, match it up, and then go through a trial model where we go through pilots into trials and then to deployed services. How do we do that? How do we pull together the stakeholders to allow us to do that? That's really critical for what we do. And then on the right-hand side there, you can see the third strand of UTA, if you will. And that's really about best practices and learning. Julie mentioned there that some of the things we've been doing over the last couple of days really is teasing out some of the learnings from our members and from other cities and partners we work with. And that's really critical to how UTA operates, is we want to find the best practices. We take those best practices from internally, from our own members, from the deployments we have in our cities, but also externally, we go out and we talk to cities around the world, trying to understand what's worked really well. And how can we bring the learnings from those into our own members? So not just that they're aware of a particular standard or a particular technology or service idea that works somewhere, but things like business models, deployment strategies, those kind of things, those learnings can be brought in, and that helps our members really move quickly and deploy the services that ultimately it's about trying to get these services out to our citizens and trying to enrich their lives as they go about their daily business. So that's kind of the framework for what the Urban Technology Alliance is doing. And how we work internally in the Urban Technology Alliance. I'm going to talk you through what I call the technical structure. This isn't the management structure per se, although it has echoes of that, but it's really how do we decide what it is we're going to focus on and how do we deliver on that. And really, the structure looks a little bit like this. The board itself provides the overall direction. Like any company, any organization, we have a board that provides overall direction for the organization. And that direction is communicated down to the president and technical director. And there really that direction is converted into strategic goals. And the strategic goals drive the technical architecture group, the TAG, which really tries to turn those strategic goals into actions. And the vehicle for turning those goals into actions is the working groups. And the working groups carry out the day-to-day activity of the Urban Technology Alliance. And they are, in a sense, critical. They are the heart of the Urban Technology Alliance. All activity happens within those working groups. The working groups are loosely modeled on the WC3 consortium, the World Wide Web Consortium, in that we have a charter for each of those working groups. The charter is agreed by members when the working group is set up, and it defines a number of things, including some of the deliverables for that working group. It defines the scope of that working group, what it is that working group is actually working on, and crucially, it defines what that working group is not working on, so that we're clear who's responsible for which activities, and there's no overlap between the different working groups. The working groups, as a unit, select a chair, and that chair is agreed between the working groups and the technical architecture group. And the chair is responsible really for guiding the day-to-day operations of that working group. The working groups operate primarily on consensus, so we're very much a consensus-based organization, and really we try and get agreement amongst members before anything is promoted. So any of the deliverables that come out of the working group have been agreed by the working group as a whole and therefore are adopted by the Alliance as a result. I will touch on this very briefly. The working groups have an area that they work on. If there's a particular sub area of that they think is important that we spend more time on, they're free to create task forces, and task forces go off, work on a particular area and deliver back into the working group. And then that model is followed really. If a new working group is proposed, a member comes and says, we really need to work on this particular area. We go through a similar model. We discuss that as an alliance itself. We decide, yes, we're going to create one of these new working groups. And then that working group kicks off. It goes through that phase of developing its charter, figuring out its scope and its deliverables, selecting a chair, and then starts working. So that's the kind of model we have as a whole in the Urban Technology Alliance. And as I say, loosely modeled on the W3C consortium. So what are the working groups? We have 5 main working groups today, and I'm going to talk you through these, just to give you a slide for each of them so that you can understand what their area of interest is and what they're working on in terms of deliverables. Quickly though, it's the technical working group, a testbed working group. We have a sustainability working group. You heard Julie talking there about sustainability as an important part, and that'll be discussed later today. We have a social working group, which again will be discussed later on today in terms of some of the activities there and some of the partners who are involved in that. And then we have a business working group. So I'll run you through those working groups and just give you a sense of each one. So starting with the testbed working group, the testbed working group is really about supporting the organization of the pilot deployments and then moving those through pilots to trials out to deployed services. Its function primarily is in a sense to bring together the partners that want to work on a particular trial, so driven by some of the needs from the cities or some of the technologies and services that are brought to us by our members. And then it operates what I'll call a fairly well-defined approach to running trials. Our members some of our members, I should say, have been developing and deploying smart city services for 10, 12 years. There's a lot of experience in the Alliance, and we've distilled that down really into best practices. And the best practices, you can see this diagram, I've thrown the diagram in here just to give you a sense, but we have a very well developed model for how to set up and run a trial. And some of the key features of that really are very early engagement with the stakeholders, right at the ideation stage. So when we're first starting to think about a particular area, we get all the stakeholders involved in just understanding that space, coming up with ideas and thinking about what will work. And we found that critical. If you don't have all stakeholders, and that's obviously the cities, some of the technology providers, but also the citizens themselves, some of the citizen and community groups. You heard probably David Vogt from Urban Opus in Canada, Vancouver, Canada yesterday, talking very much about citizen trust and how that's critical for delivering new services. And we found that. So we try and get the stakeholders involved right at the early stage. And we go through a very iterative process. You can see that there as we move the ideas through into defined trials, proof of concepts, and then out to deployed services. Very much about engagement, coming back to the stakeholders, making sure we've got the right approach to a particular problem. And then the last thing that this working group is kind of focused on is promoting the partner test beds and solutions. So it does a good job of telling all the members about what partner cities have in terms of test beds and what solutions that are being brought to the table. So cities can say, hey, that looks like an interesting solution. I see you've used that elsewhere. Can I use that in my city? The deliverables, as I've kind of talked about, are in a sense a manifestation of those activities. The trial guidelines, very well developed, as I say. Associated with that is our ethics guidelines. Again, a lot of experience over the years of running these trials. And because we're running these trials in live situations with real end users who are real citizens, we have to make sure we get the ethics right. And ethics is generally a worldwide kind of concept, but the details are different in each of our geographical areas. So we have a fairly well-developed ethics guidelines, and we ensure that our trials follow those ethics guidelines to make sure we do the best job we can when we work with our cities and our partners. And then finally, we deliver trial descriptions, and that's part of the learning, really. That's what worked, what didn't work, those kind of things. Next working group, the business working group. The business working group is really focused on trying to in a sense, move from ideas and proof of concepts to sustainable business. We've seen over the years a lot of trials, and again, as Julie hinted at, a lot of technology-driven trials. Sort of 10 years ago, a lot of the work in smart cities was technology-driven trials, and they, in a sense, faded once they were deployed because they didn't really have a good business model behind them. And whether that's a for-profit or a non-for-profit business model, it's still important to have that model in place so that you can have sustainability of the service. So the business group, working group is focused on that. On the building partnerships, as I said, a crucial part of what we do is bringing together partnerships and going out and seeking. If a city comes to us and says, we need this particular kind of service and we can't find that amongst our members, we actively go out and look for, in a sense, new members who might want to join and bring that kind of result or that service into us. We talk about network for funding opportunities. The business group focus on this, and you're going to hear from Levent Guggen, our president, in the next session, just talking a little bit about some of the funding opportunities. We try very hard to help our members understand the funding landscape per se, because that helps a lot of them get kick-started with their projects. And then finally, the business working group is working on business models and best practices associated with smart city services, so that people can understand, okay, what's worked, what's not worked in different parts of the world. And the deliverables, again, are really just a manifestation of that. The funding opportunities, we give quarterly reports, the service models and the business models. They're published as templates so our members can understand what works. Social working group, really critical, and I think one of the cross-cutting working groups in the consortium, in the alliance. It's really about trying to consider what I tend to view as kind of the critical but softer aspects of some of the work we do. What are the implications for society of the new technologies we're bringing in? We have to understand those because, again, as I hinted before, trust and citizen engagement is critical to these. If we don't have those, these services in a sense don't work. They're deployed, but they're really not taken up. You've got to have buy-in from your citizens. And so it's really important we understand the implications of these. Again, we define best practices, ensuring interests of society, interests of the citizens taken into consideration. A lot of engagement work, I've hinted at that, critical part of the social working group. And we try and just bring in the design and art aspects. Several of our projects or our members are really keen to ensure that the design, the art aspects are integrated. When you're deploying into a city is, in often cases, a designed space. It's an urban space that has been designed. There's some fantastic architecture in cities, and the services that we develop have to be, in a sense, dovetailed in with that fabric, that physical environment. So the deliverables there, obviously, societal considerations and the briefing notes that we provide for people. The sustainability working group, you heard Julie mention sort of what I call environmental sustainability. This is certainly part and parcel of what the sustainability working group is focused on, that environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, and trying to develop metrics and methodologies to benchmark and assess sustainability. There's a lot of activity worldwide on this. Some of the standards groups, the UN has activities in this, and we try and take those and bring those in and help our members understand the best way of doing this, because it's becoming increasingly important that not only should you be concerned about sustainability, both economic and environmental sustainability, but you need to be able to communicate your story and explain what are your metrics and how you're doing against those. And so that's an important part of what we do. And the deliverables out of there, methodology metrics, as I say, and a particular focus on the sustainability of the actual physical infrastructure that we're putting out there. There's some complex technologies and we want to understand the sustainability issues associated with that. And then finally, the technical working group. And the technical working group is really around that defining useful architectural patterns and best practices. And just to reiterate something you will have probably heard over the last couple of days, but if you're new and just joining today, you may not be aware of, but the Urban Technology Alliance is not in the business of developing new technologies or developing new standards. We're not a technology-driven organization in that sense. We think there's already sufficient technologies out there, and there's new technologies coming online all the time. And there's certainly a lot of standards out there. I think if, like me, you're tracking this space and have been working in this space for several years, you will probably think there's too many standards. There is an awful lot of standards activity, and it's quite confusing for our members to understand what is happening, what technology is available, what standards should they be tracking, what are less important for them. And so the technical working group really is focused on trying to help them understand that. We publish and work on, and this is a living document, a reference architecture. But that reference architecture, and this is what you're seeing on the right of the screen here, that reference architecture is not a detailed description of particular functionalities, as some of you may be more familiar with. It's around the functional requirements of a particular space. So it makes statements around if you want to provide a fully fledged city platform, you're going to need to consider the IoT components, the sensor components, and how you're managing a range of devices with different communications infrastructures. We don't make statements as an organization about which particular technology to choose, whether you go with MQTT or some other technology. We simply tell you need to be thinking about these things. At a higher level in that stack, data management, and particularly open data and citizen data, very complex issues. We talk about the requirements for those, the need for those, and some of the features you want from those, but we don't make statements about which particular technology choice or which particular standard you follow, because that's, as I say, not our business. Our business is to help our members understand. We don't recommend technologies, but we do provide information on them. So if one of our members comes to us and says, a particular technology is available to us, what do you think? We will give them feedback on that, but that's done in a fairly agnostic way. Just does it meet the kind of requirements our architecture puts in place? So quite a lot of information there. I really encourage you, if you're interested, to check out our website and some of the documents that are on our website, but more importantly, come talk to us and we can explain in more detail what's going on here. The deliverables out of that really are the architecture itself, as I talk about, and some standards work is related to landscape analysis. So really, we're trying to help our members understand what's going on in those spaces. We have a set of best practices documents, like in our other working group areas, just helping people understand this has worked well in the past in other places, either our members' projects, our own projects, or external projects. And then, as I hinted there, we provide a series of technology briefs. And the technology briefs are really, we take a look at individual technologies that are perhaps popular or being used by our members, and we give an overview of what they are, our thoughts on how they meet our overall reference architecture. We don't, as I say, recommend particular technologies, but we do talk to our members about them and try and help them understand that complex choice as they start to look at this. I mentioned at the start of the working groups that they're capable of creating task forces to look at particular issues. I've popped one on here just so you get a sense of that. In the technical working group, it has a sub-task force, which is the data brokerage task force. And data brokerage is used in the sense here, in quite the extensive sense of a data marketplace. We have several of our members and our cities who are very concerned, in a sense, about ownership of data and who's managing data. They've seen over the last few years a number of organizations, private organizations generally, who have in a sense taken control of city data, or at least have started to use and make available city data, and done the same with citizen data. And some of the cities and some of our members are a little bit concerned that at the end of the day, data about the infrastructure in a city, about transportation, etc., is city data. It's owned by the city and managed by the city on behalf of the citizens, and they want to make sure that that continues and they have control and management of that. And equally, they want to make sure that their citizens are protected when their data is being used. And so the data brokerage is really about those issues. It's about moving beyond open data to controlled management of data and allowing citizens to publish data, to know who's using their data, to revoke access to their data if necessary, and perhaps to monetize their data if that's something they're interested in, but really more about ownership of data and management of your own data. Both the cities want to manage their data and citizens want to manage their data. So that task force is looking at that. And that reports back into the technical working group, and the manifestation of that in the technical working group is around the architecture. It will make statements about the general architecture, but again, it won't make statements about a particular choice, technology choice, or a choice of the actual standards. Quick slide here. Just I'm going to switch now to talking about some of the services that we've been developed and involved in over the last few years. I've got about 7 or 8 minutes left, so I'll try and quickly go through these. This slide here is talking, just showing some of the cities that are involved in this particular conference. So we have a lot of member cities who have deployment infrastructure and test beds, as we call them. And in this particular conference, we've highlighted, I think all of these people, all of these cities have been speaking over the last 3 days or will speak later today. So I'm just going to pick out a few of those just to give you a sense of some of the things we've been working on and how the working groups fit into those. So this first one is from Grenoble Alps. We heard one of the mayors of the metropolitan area yesterday in France talking about some of the things they're working on. They've been involved in the smart city space for quite a few years now and have done a number of quite interesting activities. This project here, which was a deployment investigation, this was a trial, hasn't moved fully to a commercial service yet, or a deployed service, I should say. And this was looking really around aging in place, aging in home. And the drive for this is a lot of cities and the health care systems associated with the cities are struggling with the costs associated with hospitalization or moving people into institutes, and the social model. I think the world's changed over the last 20 years. We're less interested in moving older people into homes or into hospital. We're trying to keep them at home so that their lives continue to be active. And so this project has looked at some technologies and deployed into quite a number of, I think 13 cities and villages. They deployed technology into homes, really looking at things like daily activity monitoring, emergency, what happens when somebody falls, exercise, prevention of social isolation. So all of these issues are really important for older people so that they can stay at home and continue to lead productive and enjoyable lives. So this was a project we're involved in. We certainly had the technical working group involved in this. The business working group is actually looking at some of the longer term implications of this and trying to understand business models. Very complex area, very costly area in a sense, but pretty much every city in the Western world is dealing with this issue, this aging population issue. So a really important one. A second one from Grenoble in France. This one actually went all the way through to deployed service and is in daily use by several thousand people now, I believe. This was, Grenoble has a number of science parks, technology parks scattered around the city, and it wanted to really, in a sense, to help the people who use those. In a lot of cases, they have an awful lot of activity in those centers. They have lots of really interesting companies doing really interesting things, but there wasn't a strong sense of community amongst those people. And so they developed an application, a lot of stakeholder engagement to help them do this, but they developed an application that really was about information sharing, helping people understand, you know, if somebody's coming in to visit a high-tech company and giving a talk in that high-tech company, maybe you could invite some other people from the science park, for example, and treat it more as a public event. Or if you've got some new services you want to deploy, maybe you can tell people about it. And even sort of more mundane things like the bus schedule and what's being served at the local restaurants. These are all important parts of community building. And so this service was developed. We went through 3 or 4 iterations of trials with the technical working group, the testbed working group involved, and the others, particularly the social working group. And then this has actually been deployed as a real service and is running live there now. So a really great example of our members working together and delivering a really interesting service that has benefited the lives of the people, but also helped Grenoble to get more value out of its science park, and in a sense attract people to it because a vibrant science park is a good place to set up a new company or move your company. Bristol, we've worked with Bristol on and off over the years, several interesting projects there. I just picked one out here. This was really looking at energy management and particularly looking at the cost of energy for low-income families. This is something that I think a lot of cities are having to deal with. In the energy costs are a very significant portion of the overall family budget, if you like, or household budget. And particularly for low-income families, it can be up to sort of 25–30% of their costs. It's a significant issue for them. And trying to help them understand what they're spending their money on and how to improve and reduce their costs. And so the city was very keen to work with some of its low-income families to do that. And this worked with a number of companies, and this was part of, again, of a pilot deployment that really deployed into, I think, over 100 homes, really just providing them with information. And one of the nice things about this is it tried to provide recommendations. So it did things like say, we know that your household has a particular profile. So you've got a couple of kids maybe, and you've got these kind of devices. We've seen in other households that this works really well if you always tell the kids to turn things off or whatever. And really recommendations, kind of soft social recommendations, not just hard technology, but really trying to engage with them and say, these are good ways of reducing your energy costs. I think later today we may have a more discussion of this. Certainly on yesterday, Fujisawa City, one of our members, very active member, has been involved with several of our projects over the last 5 or 6 years in Japan. Fujisawa has its own sustainable smart city development, physical development in an urban site, actually an old factory site that was redeveloped. But we've done several projects with them over the years. I've picked out just a couple here. One was about deploying IoT or sensor technology to the garbage trucks. And this was really to help the city understand better its garbage, in a sense, its garbage management, and primarily focused really on providing better information so that they could improve the efficiency of the garbage. So understanding better where garbage is higher levels of garbage. Particular areas of the city have maybe younger families who are producing more garbage. And also, can you optimize the routes through that so that there's less cost for running the service? That was very interesting. So we had a whole set of other projects associated with that. Some of these sensors were gathering pollution information. And so we were able to track pollution information around the city because the city was very concerned about pollution levels in different parts of the city. So a really quite interesting service there. And a second one I've picked out for you from Fujisawa. I think a good example of really one moving through the cycle of initial ideas, initial services, and then into a deployed service, and then expanding out very quickly, because I know I'm pressed for time here. Fujisawa developed with Keio University an application that allowed city officers to report issues, so an issue reporting app, which they also made available to citizens. And this initial development was done by an academic group, Keio University. In fact, one of the speakers later today may touch on this. He was involved in that project, to Koro. What happened with this is that technology, Fujisawa liked it, and several other cities in Japan liked that technology. And that technology was actually picked up by NTT, the large telco in Japan, and a small SME in Japan, a service and software house called Port Hofner. And they took that and they productized that and developed a new service, a new product out of that, which they've been selling to cities around Japan. That's the Rakuten. And some of you may have heard NTT talk about that yesterday. What's really quite interesting for me about this is that went through an entire cycle inside the Urban Technology Alliance, following the processes I've talked about in our working groups. And what popped out of that was a commercial service being deployed in cities. Fantastic results. But it gets better, because what's happening now is NTT have come back in with that technology with Port Hofner and teamed up with one of our European partners, Kentju, and starting to look at extending that service, so improving its capabilities, and starting to look at if it can be marketed by Kentju in Europe. Kentju are already talking, I think, to Paris-Saclay about possible deployment of that. So you've seen that go through the cycle inside the Urban Technology Alliance and deliver a real service, a real commercial service that's affecting people's lives and in a sense, the business side of a city. But then has come back in and is now being extended again through the same processes, but now applied to a global model. So a really interesting story, I think. And again, if you're interested in the details of that, please do contact us. So just in summary, what I've gone through is I've kind of talked about those 3 strands in UTA, about our test beds, about our matchmaking, and about our best practices. I've talked about the working group structure and how it flows down from the board direction. I've given you details of the sustainability, the business, social, testbed, and technical working group. And then I've talked about example projects. And in terms of how to get involved, really it's around contact us. If you're already a member, talk to me, talk to Levent, talk to Julie. If you're not a member yet, take a look at the Urban Technology Alliance.org website, and you can get more details there.